The showdown on TV. Who's really controlling the game? Lindsey Moore thought she had the upper hand. A hard blow wrapped in a humorous disguise. A perfect trap, right on live TV. But in seconds, Trump had turned the tables, and the one who was backed into the corner wasn't him. Los Angeles. Live night. A sparkling studio. A packed audience. People didn't come here to watch a normal conversation. They came here to witness a showdown. The cameras were rolling. No one spoke, but the atmosphere was heavy. Sitting behind the interview desk, calm and confident, Donald Trump. Across from him, Lindsey Moore. The host is known for her sharpness. She has built her career on confrontations with conservative guests. And tonight she has a plan for an explosive moment. The audience is waiting. They want drama. They want tension. They want to see Trump pushed to the limit. And Moore knows it. She wastes no time. As soon as the cameras roll, she attacks. "Thank you for joining us tonight, Mr. Trump." A smile that is fake sweet. Trump doesn't waver. He just nodded, arms crossed, a small smile on his face. "My pleasure, Lindsey. Let's see if you can keep up." Laughter rippled through the room. Moore was unmoved. She was used to these games. She loved it. But tonight was more than just a casual exchange. The first few minutes followed the familiar pattern. Moore asked pointed questions. Trump responded strongly. Neither of them yielded, but the audience was waiting for something bigger, and Moore knew it was time to strike. She leaned forward. She swept a lock of hair behind her ear, a familiar gesture before she did anything daring. Her eyes flashed, not just sharp, but a little cruel. Then she dropped the question, a personal blow, a perfect trap. But what happened next? She had not expected it at all. The room froze. The atmosphere changed. Everything became heavier, as if the temperature in the room had dropped. No more laughter, no more whispers from the audience, just dead silence. Even the camera operators, trained not to react, paused for a moment. Moore kept her smile, but her body betrayed her. The initial confidence faded, because right now she knows she's gone too far, and Trump is about to take back control. Moore thought she had the game under control. She attacked, not with argument, but with humiliation. A line that was as sweet as honey, but as sharp as a knife. "Have you ever thought about cheating on Melania? Honestly, she's old school." She dropped the line like a trap, expecting a strong response from Trump. But immediately, the atmosphere in the room changed. The audience fell silent. Some chuckled, nervously. Others exchanged confused glances. Even those who weren't Trump supporters could sense it. This wasn't just a political attack. This was a personal blow, a calculated humiliation. And for a moment, Trump didn't respond immediately. The air in the room seemed to freeze. Moore expected an explosion, a violent retort, maybe a crude jab. But no, Trump was silent. He didn't look at her, not looking at the audience. He looked down at the desk in front of him. His fingers tapped lightly on the surface. Beat by beat. Subtle, but more terrifying than an explosive reaction. Moore shifted slightly in her chair. She hadn't expected it. Then Trump slowly raised his head. His expression? Unreadable. Disbelief mixed with something sharper, more dangerous. "Let me get this straight." His voice was steady. He paused just a second, but enough for everyone in the room to feel the weight. Eyes were fixed on him, waiting for an answer. "You're sitting here on national television and calling my wife, a former First Lady of the United States, outdated?" The word outdated rang out like a dagger in the air. Somewhere in the crowd, someone said, "Fuck." Moore shrugged, a smile trying to be casual. "Oh, come on, Donald." Her voice lost its edge as if trying to lighten the mood. It was just a gentle question. But Trump didn't back down. He leaned forward, his eyes locked on hers, unblinking. "No, Lindsey, it wasn't a question. It was an insult." But suppose for a second that she really meant it to be a sincere question. Moore's smile wavered. She realized the game had changed, but the one trapped wasn't Trump, and the room waited to see what Lindsey Moore would do to escape her own trap. Trump gestured to the audience, a smile playing on his lips. "Imagine if I turned the tables." The room held its breath. "Imagine I'm sitting here with a married female politician, a Democrat, of course, and I ask her, Have you ever thought about cheating on your husband? Because frankly, he's outdated. A wave of tension rippled through the room. Murmurs rippled, some nodded in agreement, others sat up straighter, suddenly realizing the real issue here. Trump let the thought hang in the air, letting it sink into everyone's consciousness before continuing. As soon as those words leave my mouth, CNN is going to air a special about me being a misogynist. Before I leave this building, the headlines are going to be screaming, and Lindsey, you're going to be leading the charge. Moore was silent. She didn't respond immediately. There was no smirk, no sharp quip, and Trump wasn't done yet. Moore blinked for the first time in the interview, no longer in control. The room was no longer tilting toward her. Not that they were for Trump, but they were moving away from her, and she could feel it. Trump leaned back in his chair, his manner relaxed, his tone sharp. Let's talk about outdated. The word had belonged to Moore, but now it was Trump's. He clasped his hands together, his voice steady, strong. Melania Trump speaks 5 languages. She's a successful businesswoman. She was the First Lady of the United States. And you, Lindsey, a self-proclaimed feminist, a warrior for women's rights, sit here and try to undermine her with an expiry date? Moore shifted in her chair. She forced a wry smile. Oh, come on, Donald, it was just a joke. Trump tilted his head, his sharp eyes locked on hers. A joke? Interesting. Let me ask you something, Lindsey. Do you have an expiration date? Her smile disappeared. The room gasped. The sound of shock. Moore felt the tension rise, looking around, trying to figure out how to regain the initiative. But Trump didn't stop. You want to talk about obsolete? As if it were a weapon, a punch you could throw without consequence. But let's be real here. If a conservative man sat in this chair and called Michelle Obama obsolete, you would be the first to call for his career to be destroyed. You would want him out of a job and probably his head on a silver platter. A flash of emotion crossed Moore's face, a moment of realization. She couldn't deny what he'd said, and Trump wasn't done yet. You want to know what's really outdated, Lindsey? Trump raised his hand, gesturing around the studio. This old tactic, this boring, lazy game, attacking conservatives' wives, kids, families, when you can't take them down yourself, that's your strategy, and it's long gone. Moore shook her head, trying to keep her tone even. Oh, come on, Donald. Trump cut in, his voice sharper now, each word like a knife. Did you ask Joe Biden if he ever thought about cheating on Jill? He paused, letting the question hang in the air. No, you didn't. He shook his head slightly, his eyes still locked on Lindsey Moore. Did you ask Barack Obama if he ever thought about cheating on Michelle? A pause, letting the weight of the sentence sink into every corner of the room. No, you didn't, because you know it's disgusting. You know it's vile. But when it's me, suddenly it's a joke? Silence. Not just the audience, even the camera crew behind the camera went still, as if they had forgotten their mission. Lindsey's jaw clenched. She wasn't used to losing control. She was used to controlling the pace of the conversation, pushing guests into dead corners, cornering them until they had no way back. But this time, she didn't just lose control, she was turned completely on her head by Trump. Trump exhaled, shaking his head slightly, as if he were genuinely disappointed. You know what, Lindsey? For years you've been screaming about feminism, about women's rights, about respect. But the first chance you get, you sit here and make fun of a woman, my wife, just because she's over 50. The room took on another shift. It was no longer just glances, no whispers. People were starting to think again. Trump chuckled, but it wasn't amusement. It was disbelief. So tell me, Lindsey, when does a woman become obsolete in your eyes? 45? 50? Should we start retiring women from relevance when they hit menopause? Lindsey opened her mouth, but no words came out. She knew that no one in the room was on her side anymore. She had thrown a punch, expecting Trump to stumble, but instead she had given him the moment of the night. And the fallout was just beginning. She sat up straighter, trying to push back the wave of silence that had settled over the studio. She needed to regain control before it slipped completely out of her hands. She laughed softly, a forced laugh. Oh, Donald, you're being dramatic. It was just a little fun, a little teasing. Trump shook his head, his voice calm, but firm, like a man who had seen this game played out 1,000 times before. No, Lindsay, it wasn't. And you know it. He leaned forward, his eyes never leaving hers. If it was just a little fun, you wouldn't be squirming in your seats right now. The audience sensed the shift. The power dynamics in the room had flipped, and everyone knew it. Lindsay tried to counter. She glanced at the crowd, as if seeking support. I think we're getting a little off track, she said, trying to keep her tone casual. I'm just observing. Melania, of course, is beautiful. But let's be real, most men in your position tend to, you know, go for younger women. Trump smirked, and in that moment, Lindsay flinched. Something in his eyes told her she'd made a mistake. Trump leaned forward, his elbows on the table. That little trick you all love to pull. You insult someone, you make fun of them, and when you get called out, you hide behind, I'm just observing. He shook his head slightly. No, Lindsay, you're trying to humiliate my wife. Lindsay opened her mouth, but Trump didn't stop. He raised his hand, as if drawing a circle around her. And let me ask you something, because we're talking about looks, about old-fashioned people. He pointed at her. How old are you? Mid-40s. A sharp intake of breath rang out from the audience. Lindsay's eyes flashed. She forced a smile, but there was nothing natural about it. Why does that matter? Trump shrugged, his eyes still as sharp as a showrunner's. I'm just observing. The audience erupted. Some laughed, some gasped, and the rest simply sat there, watching the scene unfold before them. This was not the interview they'd expected. This was not the scenario Lindsey Moore had planned. Her face darkened, not with anger, but with the realization that she had lost control. Trump's voice was calm, but calculated. Because now, Lindsay, it's not about me anymore. It's about you. Lindsay sputtered. She was losing, and she knew it. Trump continued, not giving her a chance to regain the advantage. You want to sit there and talk about old-fashioned women, but the minute I turn it around, suddenly it's offensive. Suddenly it's different. You don't like it when the mirror's held up, do you? Lindsay had no choice. She chuckled, waving her hand dismissively. Okay, I get it. Trump leaned back in his chair, letting out a soft sigh. Yeah, I think so. With one simple sentence, he ended the exchange in a way that no one, especially Lindsey Moore, could have predicted. There was no anger, no emotional outburst, just a perfect reversal of the tables. And just like that, Lindsey Moore had lost control of the interview. The audience felt it, the crew felt it, and soon the entire internet would feel it. The real blow-up didn't happen on air, but on social media. It didn't take long. Within minutes of the interview ending, clips of the confrontation were all over the platform. The moment Lindsey Moore threw out her provocative question, only to receive a merciless retort from Trump, quickly spread like wildfire on X, formerly Twitter. One of the first viral posts was sharp. Lindsey Moore thought she was going to embarrass Trump. Instead, she got obliterated on live TV. Brutal. Within the first hour, the clip had been viewed more than 3 million times. The comments section exploded with thousands of responses. A wave of criticism of Moore swept across social media, not just from Trump supporters, but from neutrals as well, who recognized that the attack was not just aimed at Trump, but also carried a disturbingly misogynistic tone. Imagine the outrage if someone had the nerve to call Michelle Obama old-fashioned on national TV. Lindsey Moore didn't embarrass Trump. She embarrasses herself. Trump didn't just defend Melania. He exposed the hypocrisy of self-proclaimed feminists. The divide was immediate. While conservatives praised Trump for standing up for his wife, the left tried to spin the story. MSNBC quickly hosted a discussion where one commentator called the exchange unnecessarily explosive, even accusing Trump of bullying a female journalist. But that argument didn't have the impact they wanted, because the discussion was no longer just about how Trump reacted. It became about, why does Lindsey Moore think she can demean Melania Trump that way? And why does she think women have expiration dates? The backlash against Moore didn't stop. It quickly escalated. The next morning, headlines covered every news site. The Washington Examiner ran, Lindsey Moore criticized for disrespectful question about Melania Trump. The Daily Wire wrote, Lindsey Moore crosses the line. Fox News called it feminist hypocrisy exposed. Other publications weren't left out, with stories delving into how a TV host was facing backlash for ageist remarks. And then came the final blow. Sponsors began to feel the heat. Fox News, one of Moore's biggest advertisers, was bombarded with emails from angry viewers demanding clarification. Do you tolerate this ageism and double standards? And isn't feminism just for leftists? Why demean a woman just because she's over 50? Lindsey Moore knew she was under siege. She tried to do some damage control. On Instagram, she posted a short, carefully crafted statement. As a journalist, I ask tough questions. That's my job. I regret if my words were misinterpreted, but I support the right to challenge public figures. But the thing is, no one gets anything wrong. Everyone heard it loud and clear. And the internet wasn't done with Lindsey Moore. But the real fallout was just beginning. By the next evening, her name was all over the headlines, but not in the way she had expected. What started as an attempt to humiliate Trump backfired spectacularly, making her the target of a backlash storm she never anticipated. Media watchdog groups quickly jumped in, calling Moore out for sexism and hypocrisy. A Wall Street Journal op-ed posed the weighty question, why would a host who has spent years fighting for women's rights mock a woman based on her age? Even some influential voices in the Liberal Party began to distance themselves from Moore. CNN's Jake Patterson, who has never been shy about criticizing Trump, reluctantly admitted, I'm not a Trump fan, but this question is not journalism. It was a cheap shot, and he turned it on her in a powerful way. Meanwhile, conservative news outlets had a field day. On Fox News, a group of commentators analyzed the moment frame by frame, calling it one of the most embarrassing things in the history of television. Every platform scrambled to dissect and discuss it, turning Moore from questioner to buttress. But the biggest shock came from Moore's own network. Executives went into damage control mode. A leaked memo revealed that while they publicly supported her, internally it was a different story. Moore's ratings plummeted, advertisers became hesitant, and the network was unwilling to shoulder the cost of an unnecessary scandal. The following Monday, Lindsey Moore opened the show with an apology, but it was clear from the first moment that it would not work. I lost my temper. I made a remark that was misinterpreted. It was never my intention to offend or demean anyone. I have the utmost respect for Melania Trump, and I regret any misconstrued words. The comments flooded in immediately. An apology that is not an apology. We all heard you loud and clear. You regret your hypocrisy, not what you said. It didn't stop there. Within weeks, the pressure was mounting. By the end of the month, Lindsey Moore went on vacation, a move that many believed was actually a discreet hiatus. Others speculated that her television career was officially over. What was more obvious, she underestimated Trump. She thought she could throw a punch and move on, but she walked into a storm she was completely unprepared to handle. But the story wasn't over. The dust was still settling, and the conversation continued to expand. This wasn't just about Lindsey Moore. The interview had exposed something deeper. In the days that followed, the conversation began to move beyond Trump, beyond Melania, even beyond Lindsey Moore. It morphed into a broader discussion about media bias, double standards, and how powerful women, especially conservatives, are treated. Conservative commentators were quick to point out the blatant hypocrisy. If this were a liberal woman, the media would call it sexist. But because it's Melania Trump, they laugh. Here's the story, which follows the flow and makes sure the important elements are covered. Even some left-leaning voices admitted that Lindsey Moore's question was inappropriate. I don't like Trump, wrote one veteran journalist, but there's something ugly about using a woman's age as a weapon. We don't do that to men. The conversation was no longer just about Melania Trump. It quickly expanded to include names like Hillary Clinton, Kamala Harris, Michelle Obama, powerful women who have, at some point, been the target of ridicule for their looks, their age, or even their marriages. But this is where things get interesting. The very people who have spent years speaking out against sexism and media bias suddenly fell silent when the target was Melania Trump. Trump supporters saw it immediately. They realized that the issue was never really about protecting women. It was always about controlling the conversation. And Lindsey Moore, with her demeaning question, became the perfect example of what people were starting to tire of with the selective media outrage. The way some women's dignity is protected, while others are treated as open targets for attack. But Trump did something that not many politicians can do. He didn't get defensive. He didn't lash out. He turned the tables in a way that no one expected. With calmness and efficiency, he not only defended his wife, but also pushed the conversation into uncomfortable territory. He forced people to ask themselves, why would a conservative woman be attacked this way? Why do we let some jokes go but react so violently to others? Why are feminists silent when the victim is a woman they don't like? Whether you agree with Trump or not, that question resonates. This was more than just a viral clip. This was a calculated moment, a turning point that the media could not ignore. Lindsey Moore's cheap shot at Melania Trump was more than just an embarrassing moment. It was a mirror of the hypocrisy of the media industry she represented. The internet kept this debate alive for weeks. Forums, articles, and comment shows were constantly dissecting the event. This was no longer just a small incident, but a classic example of media bias. Is this what a free woman should be treated like? Why are some protected while others are made public spectacles? And perhaps the most important question of all, when did we decide that a woman's value has an expiration date? That question has many people thinking. Because at its core, this isn't just about Trump. It isn't just about Melania. It isn't even about Lindsey Moore. It's about respect. It's about the hypocrisy of the so-called empowerment movement, a movement that only protects women with whom it consents. And for millions of people watching, this moment was a wake-up call. Melania Trump isn't just a former model, a former businesswoman, or a former first lady. She isn't obsolete. She isn't disposable. And no woman should be treated that way. The moment Lindsey Moore smiled, thinking she had delivered the perfect blow, was the moment she lost. She didn't beat Trump, she just exposed herself. And Trump? He didn't just win the debate, he changed the conversation. Let me know in the comments. Don't forget to like and subscribe for more content like this.